Good afternoon, good morning, for those on the West Coast. It's my pleasure to talk to you a bit about this theme regarding inner transformation. And I'm now going to share my screen to use a slide presentation to lead us through this. So, the title of the presentation is Inner Alchemy, the Journey to Self-Mastery. And so, today we're going to explore a concept known as inner alchemy, the transformation of our consciousness through deliberate self-mastery. Historically, alchemy was associated with turning base metals into gold, but the deeper tradition always pointed towards something more profound, transforming the ordinary human personality into a fuller expression of our highest nature. So this presentation is about that inner transformation. We're going to explore how our thoughts, words, and actions shape our experience, how karmic principles operate in everyday life, and how we can move forward from an ego-centered perspective to a consciousness rooted in oneness. And this is really not simply philosophy, it really is a practical framework for daily living. And the laboratory is not a monastery or a mountaintop, but it is our everyday life, our relationships, our reactions, and our choices. In the end, I hope you'll see self-mastery not as perfection, but as a lifelong process of alignment with the deeper underlying reality of really oneness that governs all. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, let's say, the crucible of daily life, right? And we all kind of experience the daily challenges of life. No kind of living creature escapes those. Uh, and while many may think that meditation and prayer or study are the principal means to this spiritual growth, and while all three of those things are very important, our daily life is really where the work plays out. The duality of material life is a function of the material plane, and we will get the sun and the rain and all the other kind of things that take place in material life. Our inner work can provide for us sort of an umbrella. By cultivating inner harmony, we really will create what appears to be sort of a miraculous external harmony in our lives and the way things operate in our lives. And I would refer to it as miraculous somewhat, only because through pretty much all of our education and conditioning and just life experience, the untutored, unguided life experience that largely traditional upbringing and education affords us, life seems to be relatively perilous and kind of strewn with pitfalls and difficulties, etc. And what we can learn through this process of inner alchemy, this inner work, is that we really are able to live in this material world, but in one analogy is walking through the rain, but having an umbrella. Right? The rain will come. The rain is necessary as part of the larger experience, and it reflects kind of the needs of human consciousness and other evolving consciousness on the planet. But the difficulties that can come with that at times, by cultivating this inner harmony, this inner alignment, one will come to find, and I'm quite certain that many of those on this call have found this in their own experience at this stage, but if you're kind of early on the Rosicrucian path or a similar path, you'll come to find this out that um, in many ways, one goes through life with an umbrella. It doesn't remove us from the challenges that we must individually face, because that is the purpose of this growth and this evolution. But a lot of the kind of extraneous external things that take place and turn to be difficulties for other people and challenges or troubles, very often you find life providing a smooth pathway through those things. Again, but not giving us sort of a ticket to stop evolving and growing. So, the big idea there is, life is the arena where things take place. It's not simply in a a monastery or in a ashram necessarily, but it really is in everyday life. So that means that every day, every moment, we are kind of doing the work or not doing the work, right? But that's the workshop that we're in. And ultimately, the great work as it's been traditionally described is where we cultivate an inner state that basically kind of determines how we respond to things that happen externally. And by cultivating this inner state, we really do uh, provide ourselves with somewhat of a shield to make our way through life, uh, and ultimately leading us to the expression of this inner infinite intelligence that is the source of our being, where we reflect it more and more fully in its nature through our material existence. And so we can look at kind of this architecture, so to speak, of karma. Uh, so here's what I think it's really important for us to appreciate. But every thought, word, and action radiates out from us. And I think we tend to think about our actions and sometimes our words, but our thoughts are equally powerful, right? Uh, and since the cosmic consciousness is universal, and I think we get to see that through some of the things that take place in our lives. I mean, some of the beautiful serendipitous things that take place in our life, right? We see there's this indescribable intelligence that accounts for all the small things also in our lives. So we're connected to this whole. All of our thoughts, actions, and words kind of radiate out. None of it kind of escapes the cosmic response. I think, and largely due to my own upbringing, uh, I have a lot of kind of, I call them Christian, holy references, scriptural references. But it was said, not a hair from one's head or a sparrow falls from a tree without it being taken note of, right? So every expression that we make of ourselves happens and generates a response. And it can be pleasing, not so pleasing, depending on the nature of it. So everything sends a ripple through this fabric of existence. And there's a beauty to that when I think one thinks about it. And it returns to its source in kind, right? As someone told me many years ago, he said, if you plant corn, you're not going to get peas. So whatever we send out is what we get back. And mastery requires this realization of oneness and love in our thoughts, words, and actions. And that really is the sort of is an ultimate goal. Uh, uh, Karma is not so much a cosmic judge, but a cosmic mirror. So what we put out is what we get back. The deeper our realization is that we are interconnected, and what we send to the world often returns from us through this web of existence, the more in harmony we will find ourselves with the entirety. So understanding this naturally encourages us to be very mindful of our inner and outer lives. So let's look at these three sources of karma, and it's just seems to me important to appreciate, treat all of them equally. So we know we have our actions, and from my observation at least, they're the easiest ones, so to speak, to clean up, to manage and correct. Okay, stop doing this, don't do that, etc. Right? And so those are kind of the easiest, not necessarily easy, but the most accessible and easy in many ways. We just kind of begin to curtail our actions and behaviors. Uh, the next level, of course, is our words. A bit more difficult to control because sometimes they come out without a lot of premeditation, right? Their reaction, so to speak. But they also can be caught and corrected even mid-sentence, and it's really a practice. If you see yourself saying things that, well, let's say, may be out of harmony with the notion of the oneness of all this creation or whatever, let's say that your conscience says to you, "Ooh, that's not good," stop mid-sentence. Just stop. Stop it there. No one will notice why you stopped, or maybe they may notice that you stopped, but likely not. But that training can allow us to begin to really harness the words that we speak, uh, even if they're ones that come out of a lot of habits and so on. Actions kind of easy, words a bit more challenging, but they also can be fixed. The last item here is our thoughts. And uh, from personal observation and experience, this is the most difficult aspect to transform uh, because our thoughts basically come out of very often deep, habitual, and deeply conditioned responses based on our experience as physical creatures. Uh, so they create karma, though. All right, that's the important thing to keep in mind. They create karma. Everything creates karma, whether karma that you're going to like or karma that you're not going to like so much, right? But they create karma. So it behooves us. It's in our best interest. If we don't like unpleasant things taking place in our life unduly or more than necessary, is look at how to deal with our thoughts. Now, granted, thoughts arise, and they arise. There are two things that I would say uh, one can wisely do with them. So one uh, is when they arise, if they are not generous and uh, kind of how one would want others to think of one or think towards one, or that you would thoughts that you'd want to uh, direct toward someone you loved, your most loved ones and cherished, right? If they're not like that, right? The big thing is a major thing is they say, do not entertain them. Because when we really allow that thought to take hold in us and we begin to feel it, sense it, and kind of live in it, perhaps enjoy it, whatever the case may be, we put energy behind that thought, and that will come back to us, and will come back to us measured with that energy. So if you see yourself, ooh, this thought has arisen, it's a reaction, right? It's not charitable, right? It's judgmental, whatever the case may be. Stop it there. Don't allow yourself to kind of sink into it more deeply and to add to it and think, well, why it's so correct, right? Stop it there. The second thing, though, is that it really kind of is wise and behooves us to do is reframe it. Reframe your understanding of that experience there and reframe it in such a way that it brings forth feelings of tolerance, love, and compassion, right? And then live in that thought, right? Live and evoke and emote that thought, right? Send that now, therefore, out into the cosmic, right? Uh, you know, there's a quote attributed to lots of different sources, so can't say that I could pinpoint for you the origin of it, but it goes to the effect of be kind to everyone you meet, for each is waging a great battle. That battle being life, right? Getting through life, right? Particularly because we're saddled with ignorance pretty much through our education and upbringing and all the things that kind of the mundane world presents to us. So life's challenging. So be kind to everyone you meet, for each is waging a great battle. That reframes it, right? If you put that in mind, is a book that was authored by a former American Ballet Theater dancer. And, American Ballet Theater is kind of the pinnacle of ballet in the United States. And she was a renowned soloist. And the title of her book was I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can. So in a sense, have mercy on me, right? So all of us human beings, we're kind of waging that same battle, right? One faster or another. So bring that back to mind, or whatever device or tool that you find handy that works for you, and therefore respond toward that same individual, that same thing, uh, context, whatever it is, with thoughts of compassion, love, and solace, right? Live in those, and you'll begin to transform yourself as well. So uh, it's so important, this part of thoughts. We I think are not trained to recognize our thoughts are so powerful. You've got, the saying from, I think, Proverbs or something, as a man or woman thinketh, so are they. But there's also whatever kind of thought you hold in your heart, you've already kind of performed the act in effect, right? So if you take nothing else away from this, is recognize the salience, the power, the importance of us bringing about that transmutation that ultimately transmutes our thoughts as well, because then we will see the life in harmony. And as you go along this path, and my guess is for many of you on this call, you know this through experience at this stage, uh, we see the karmic response very rapidly. So this is not kind of an idle point. It really is factual. And so the importance of our actions, yes, our words and our thoughts. So don't give up on that. This is not an overnight job. Matter of fact, it's estimated in a lot of different estimates. But the more conservative estimates say that human beings have about 5 to 6,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot of thoughts to kind of rein in. At least there's a certain percentage of them beside what I want to have for lunch kind of thought, right? So anyway, that's just the point I'd like to kind of emphasize. So if we kind of look at our kind of you know, framework for daily calibration, so to speak. And this is just a beautiful thing. And then early in the Rosicrucian studies, we were introduced to the crow ma'at. And pardon my pronunciation of ma'at. For most of my life, I'm pronouncing it Matt. But I'm not promising that what I say is ma'at is correct either. So please do your own research. But anyway, Confessions to Ma'at, who was a god of related to truth and integrity and honesty. So that is it's a litany of what they call negative affirmations. And if you're not familiar with it, you can Google online and find versions of it. And it really kind of gives us a chance, a checklist in a sense, to look at our day. Did I do this? Did I read the scale for the buyer and this, et cetera, for the et cetera? There's just a list of things. And uh, personally, never found that I made it to the bottom of the list without going, ow, 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 a few times. Okay. So that notion of that, right? Reviewing our deeds, in a sense, another beautiful tool is the Rosicrucian Creed of Peace, and it was authored by our former Imperator Ralph M. Lewis. And it brings it down to such nuance that very often we don't recognize the nature of some of our thoughts and some of our actions and how they really are kind of a violation of this oneness. Uh, so both of those are very good things. Another thing is, again, comes out of a Christian tradition, but there are words similar, I'm quite sure, across most major religious traditions and spiritual traditions. But the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, et cetera, et cetera. So we need this work to help work on ourselves, begin to recondition ourselves. So keep in mind, by the way, this point here, the necessity of constant refinement. This is kind of tough, perhaps tough truth, but it is true. Because as long as we're on the planet, we're still going through some of this and be going through some of this process here. Again, coming out of the tradition I'm most familiar with, the Christian tradition, Jesus, the Master Jesus, obviously, an illumined individual, has the parable of the vine and the branches. And yes, it's I'm the vine and the branches, but then there's a point in it where it says, the vine that bringeth forth much fruit, the Lord purgeth it so that it brings forth more fruit. And I will be quite honest with you as a young person hearing that, in church. it would throw me back in my pew, so to speak. Like, whoa, gee whiz, it's pretty tough, right? But this we must continue to evolve. We must continue to evolve, and we're not there yet, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be on this call, right? Or you wouldn't be on the planet, right? So we have to continue to evolve, and uh, that means sometimes putting aside things that were, as they said in the, I guess, Jewish Old Testament, or uh, in Proverbs. When I was a child, I kind of, did childish things, but now coming into adulthood, I have to put those aside. Well, that's applies to us, but in many, many nuanced ways as we evolve. Things that you may have found that you didn't see an immediate karmic reaction, adverse karmic reaction to, or corrective karmic reaction. Now you will find one because you must let that go. And it's the same thing you find in Buddhism about attachment. I have to let these things go, right? Sometimes they kind of feel like very seminal to us because of our upbringing or our experiences, etc. But they have to be let go very often. And so you will be confronted while you have an umbrella, but under that umbrella that kind of keeps a lot of the larger external things from kind of afflicting you. But you'll be working under that umbrella because if you're not working, the umbrella moves a bit, right? So you'll be working there because there's this constant refinement of our thoughts, words, and actions. And a lot of times it won't always be evident what they are, but we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So I'm kind of looking at, where does some of this tension or conflict come from, in a sense, in ourselves? And it seems to me one way that has been very often kind of pointed out is between these kind of two aspects of self, the ego identity and the higher self. And keeping in mind that the ego identity is dominated by the conscious of the ego identity is dominated by the physical body. The ego's one of its main functions is to protect the welfare of the physical self, right? That's likely its first and foremost job, right? Because remember, you really can't stay out here and do this work unless you stay in a physical body, right? So you need to be out here, in a body. So the ego is looking, how do I protect the interests of this body? How do I kind of ensure its avoidance of discomfort and its needs are going to be met, right? The ego only sees itself as finite and mortal because it identifies with the body. That's all it kind of knows. So it makes a lot of decisions based on that. Very short-sighted or nearsighted, etc. Right? Its governing principle is based on survival instincts, personal history, and perceived limitation. Right? So, survival instincts, which can be from self protection to eating and reproducing, etc. Our personal histories, which affect how we approach those things, and it's it's perceived limitation, and the ego is kind of limited because as long as you're kind of about the ego and the I Tom, I Julian, I Mary, I so and so, it's limited. It's the most limited expression, right? So okay, so that, but it's trying to do its job. It's not very smart in a sense, right? It doesn't know more than kind of it's kind of myopic work, kind of functions with blinders on, so to speak, right? Then there's the higher self that is also resonant in us, which gives rise to our objective consciousness as well as our subconscious and so on. So it's our connection to uh, the expression, the realization of the cosmic conscious, even though our realization of it is very kind of finite and limited, right? But we're realizing it. That's how we can, be here and experience and see the beauty of a sunset. It's because of our participation in this cosmic consciousness. But its underlying is this idea of oneness, because that's where it comes from. It's not finite and limited by the body and the ego identity. It's not personal. It's not about Tom's experience or Jane's experience, and that's what it's about. No, it's not personal. It operates from basically this fundamental idea of limitlessness and immortality. And its governing principle is about direct alignment with the infinite intelligence and universal oneness. So that's the kind of unifying aspect of it. So if you imagine, as we're looking for this transformation, this inner alchemy, what we've, looking to do, we're looking to kind of transform the ego identity to have it more express the higher self based on these principles, right? So transform, transmuted, right? To present uh, this higher aspect of ourselves, which is also in us and available, and obviously manifests in many ways, through our love of others, as an example, right? And our concern about others, right? That's that higher thing. It's going beyond. And as we know, modern scientists spend a lot of time trying to explain why people do things that are altruistic because it makes no sense in many instances, they can't figure out to really make it make sense from simply a biological evolutionary perspective. But we know it's because there's this higher part of our being that recognizes our connection to it all. So the oneness, right? Just like I say, the infant realizes eventually that its toe is part of it. And after that, it doesn't bite on it, right? So we look out for it because we realize that oneness. So that's that governing principle. So that's where we're, uh, trying to get. Say the spiritual path is not about destroying the ego. Right? The ego, it's about getting the because the ego serves very practical functions. Rather, it is about placing the ego in service to the higher awareness. Right? Think of the beauty of that, where it can express in the world. Right? This higher awareness. So, I want to talk a little bit about free will because that seems to be a topic related, obviously, to karma and what we've been talking about. And say sometimes people think about free will as the ability to have unlimited choices. Like example, you wanted to fly, but why can't I? know you can't. It's not one of your options. In scientific and philosophical terms, they talk about degrees of freedom. We don't have unlimited degrees of freedom as human beings, right? We can't go fly, we can't live without food, but we do have choices that we can make, right, within our own little sphere of freedom. So the idea here is not to respond based on the ego identity, which basically is functions out of fear and limitation, right? And they are leading to, unfortunately, into these endless cycles of false choices due to ignorance of its higher nature and cosmic law, but to choose based on our alignment with our spiritual evolution, basically acting in harmony with this infinite intelligence and our own path of growth. So those are the choices, and we get that choice likely 50 times a day, little and big, little and big, right? How am I going to react to this person who is says something to me and I think, oh, it's a little rude, and so am I going to react rudely in response? Or am I going to realize, okay, they're acting out of whatever ignorance they have of this situation and condition, and they are like someone, like my own, like I would react to someone I, greatly cared about, and act therefore out of the higher aspect of self, right? So we're giving that choice, uh, and it's put very nicely by Samaton, Louis Claude de Samaton, where he refers to that which is conducive to our own evolution and our own good. Uh, so we're going to kind of look at, and this is a little bit, I think, what most of us are familiar with. We're talking about the kind of how do we tune this inner receiver? How do we uh, begin to hear the cosmic speaking to us through all of the noise that kind of is in our lives, right? We have to kind of hear this voice amidst all of our thoughts, desires, and emotions, but it is there. And the more we go search for it, we begin then to get that frequency and we get to hear it more clearly as we go along. And by listening to that part, kind of squelching out this noise of the physical plane to get this cosmic guidance and acting on it, it brings us into this greater attunement with the higher self and our soul consciousness. And then we see what happens in terms of our lives, right? We see the beauty manifest in our lives. I want to touch on here as we're moving along this thing, a trap that is a way of the trap of specialness. Someone said to me years ago, they said, well, we think that all people are created equal, but none to ourselves, right? That all people are created equal, but none to ourselves. That's the trap, right? So when we see ourselves as special, right, somehow or another, we elevate and make ourselves special with the goal basically of increasing our chance of survival. right? People want to be important. They want to be special because they'll get their needs met, they believe. That's the physical self speaking. It doesn't realize that, there's an unlimited set of resources that's available to us in the cosmic, right? So, but as soon as we make ourselves special, we're devaluing others by comparison. So this other manifestation of God, we're devaluing when we make ourselves special, right? So we've got to, uh, work with that impulse, right? It's a kind of foundational thing, perhaps in all of us, but it undermines where we're going. That separation is kind of a violation of this core principle of the oneness of humanity and of all creation. It's like cutting across it. Uh, Personal affirmation that has been useful for me, and my recommendation would be make up your own or whatever, right? But here you get the idea is there is no I, there's only you, meaning the divine, the God consciousness behind that gives us, allows us to live, move, and have our being in them, right? The I is a lie, right? It's a made up idea that it's like the wave thinking it's independent of the ocean, right? That's us. Oh, I'm the way. No, no. Reality is we're just the ocean, right? There's only the ocean. There is no I. There's only you. The I's a lie. You are the true. It's one of those things that, a tool that for me is useful. And would recommend that you look at, finding tools for yourself that you find helpful of trying to remember that we own none of it. We don't own our thinking, our thoughts. Don't own our breath. We don't own our existence and our life, right? It all is from the ocean, so to speak, not the wave. So just to keep in mind. Uh, I'm going to call it maybe the last kind of big point here is just to talk about impersonality. Uh, this is a challenge, and personality is often misunderstood. People very often think it means being cold, detached, or uncaring. That's not what it means. It means seeing clearly without distortion, not using our personal history. So in this beautiful illustration brought to you by artificial intelligence, right? You got all these little colors on the side there, and it's all mishmashed and jumbled up, right? And that's kind of, all of our personal history and our wounds and our things that have happened to us, right? That create us, make us react, right? When we get to impersonality is where we're able to now respond to reality with a clearness without our own baggage. And as a result, we don't receive others we receive others, you know, uh, honestly and objectively. In order to treat people and other living creatures fairly, we have to work to get to impersonality. Even the simplest thing, think about it. When there's somebody you meet or somebody you see because of some outer characteristic or outer appearance or what they belong to or who they root for or whatever, right? That you react to them based on your own, oh, I like the Knicks, you like the Spurs, therefore I don't like you. Uh, you know, that is basically, uh, even when you respond to them with that, right? You're reacting adversely initially, right? There's a reaction, right? You're sending a vibration out into the cosmos. It's a choking off vibration of energy, right? It's a harmful thing. So we've got to get to a personality to actually get to fairness. To treat all living things, we have some bugs we like, some we don't like, right? They're all God expressing the same divine intelligence, same cosmic intelligence, right? So all those things we need to reflect on. Kind of it's taken us to wrap it. The underlying idea is there's a oneness to creation. If you keep that in mind, that is this advance and attune me more with the idea of the oneness, or it doesn't. That really kind of tells us a lot. And I just make two quotes here. One from a musician named John McLaughlin, who just shared something very brilliant. He said, "When you realize the divinity that's within you, you will recognize the divinity that's in others and not look at them the same way." That's beautiful, I believe. Jesus spoke directly from realization of cosmic consciousness, right? Whatever you do unto least of mine, you do unto me. So this notion of oneness, our ultimate challenge is to recognize absolutely that everyone and everything is as God in manifestation and respond to it with the same caring and concern, right? Of that which we love most dearly ourselves already. So, when you kind of get down to this idea of the mastery of life, it's, we're looking for this oneness of cosmic consciousness, reframe our thoughts, cultivate in personality, and use our free will, right, to keep choosing to act in harmony with this infinite intelligence as we go along. And our concluding thought is The mastery of life requires bringing our thoughts, words, and actions into alignment with the underlying actuality of the oneness of the cosmic.